is to say biotechnology, neurotechnology, and information technology. So what are they doing to the human rights and how should we regulate them? These are the kinds of questions, well, we need to explore with an interdisciplinary vision, which brings together scientific, ethical, philosophical, legal points of view, and that is exactly what a brand new book is providing, Cambridge Handbook of Information Technology, Life Sciences and Human Rights. And this book, well, we are lucky to have here 4 of the 5 co-authors of the book. Marcello Jenka, he's a philosopher and cognitive scientist. He's a scientific collaborator at CDH, and he's a professor at Technical University of Munich. Laura Liguri, she's a partner in the Italian law firm Portolano Cavallo, focusing on data protection, matters privacy. And Elisa Stefanini, she's a PhD in constitutional law and also partner of the same Italian law firm, focusing at the, and also, focusing on regulatory matters and in the life sciences. And then we have Roberto Andorno. He's a professor of biomedical law at the School of Law and researcher at the biomedical ethics at the University of Zurich. So, as all of you may not have already read the entire book, which we can understand right now, it will change, of course. Each of them will present, will take like 5 to 10 minutes to introduce you to their chapter they wrote. So you will also have, I guess, a few questions to ask them from this departure. And this moment of Q&A will come after the interventions of 2 other interlocutors we are delighted to have with us today. Dr. Milena Costas-Trascasas. She's Instagramming her presence right now here. Thank you, Milena Costas-Trascasas. She's a chair of the UN Human Rights Council Advisory Committee. Thank you very much for being here. She's a lawyer and she's more specifically working on the human rights implications in neurotechnologies. She will tell us more about it. And Dr. Gérard Escher, he is a neurobiologist, and he plays a leadership role at the GESDA, which is a Swiss foundation working on anticipating and developing global governance on science and tech. Thank you very much, Gérard Escher, to be here. So thanks to their participation, you will not only have a view of these questions from an academic point of view, but also from the international policy world. So after a short presentation by each of them of their work, their expertise, there will be a time for a discussion together, including you, public, so you will have questions to bring. Here is the menu for this 1 hour 30 discussions, besides the real meal you're having here, which is our way to still distinguish humans and artificial intelligence, food. Before that, as you may know, this event is organized by the College of Humanities, so I'm happy to give the floor and the mic to its director, who is also a well-known expert on these questions that will be discussed today as AI and the human-machine symbiosis, Professor Frédéric Kaplan.
Thank you, Anne-Laure. Welcome to all of you. It's so nice to see you so numerous, for this type of event. Thanks, Anne-Laure, for organizing and making our community so alive on these questions. So yeah, things go very fast in technology, in biotechnology, in artificial intelligence, and especially also if you consider the convergence of these different things. There are effects local, there are effects which are global. The questions about policies are extremely important. So we're not discussing academic ideas for the future. We're deciding really, what is the shape of the world to come? And so the elements which are going to be under debate are potentially extremely important influence for the life of our children and our grandchildren. So I'm very happy that the College of Humanities can act a bit like a hub on these questions. We want to animate the community on this question, organize the conversations, having you aware about the implications, discuss multiple perspectives from cultural point of view and technological point of view on these issues. And I'll be super happy sorry, if the EPFL can engage in that particular role, and if we can play a role in this engagement. So thanks a lot and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you very much, Frédéric Kaplan, Director of the CDH. This event is organized under the patronage of the Swiss Commission for UNESCO. And this is a privilege to have with us today the Secretary General of the Swiss Commission for UNESCO, Mr. Nicolas Mathieu. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. So I will read my text, not like Professor Kaplan, who is really who made a good introduction like this. So it's a pleasure to be here today as we embark on a journey to explore the evolving landscape and technology and its profound impact on our fundamental rights and ethical boundaries. I would like to thank the EPFL and in particular the College of Humanities for hosting this highly topical event for which the Swiss Commission for UNESCO granted its patronage without hesitation. Digital technologies and biotechnologies are driving rapid change in the world. Now an integral part of our daily lives, they are shaping the way we live, the way we work, the way we interact, but also they are challenging our sense of humanity. Critical multidisciplinary discussion and reflections on these developments and their convergence are of the utmost importance as they can have significant and lasting effects, notably on human rights. The book presented today makes a remarkable contribution in this respect at a time when the issues are also subject of active and sensitive debate at multilateral level. After declaration on bioethics and human genetic use at the turn of the century, in 2021, the member states of UNESCO adopted, after expert consultation and extensive intergovernmental discussion, a recommendation on the ethics of AI. This UNESCO recommendation is the first ever global standard setting instrument to address the intersection of AI, ethics, and human rights. Switzerland was actively involved in this discussion and advocated for keeping human needs, behaviors, and goals at the center of AI design, firmly grounded in human rights. This year, the General Conference of UNESCO will further launch the preparatory work for the elaboration of a new recommendation, this time on the ethics of neurotechnology. A group of experts will be appointed by the Director General of UNESCO to prepare a first draft that should be ready next year. After this drafting phase, negotiations between states will begin until 2025. Discussions on ethics and neurotechnology will therefore keep us busy for the next 2 years. On another level, the Swiss Commission for UNESCO has initiated what we call the Geneva Dialogues for a human rights-based approach within UNESCO. Together with the UNESCO, its office in Geneva, and the University of Geneva, in partnership with the OHCHR and the Regard NGO network, we launched this initiative with the aim to scaling up learning about human rights-based approaches and partnerships in different areas where UNESCO is active. These dialogues have already taken place, first on freedom of expression, second on the right to science, and the third one on the right to culture. A fourth one on right to education is planned, and it is also our objective to underline the value of a cross-sectoral thrust at UNESCO. Ladies and gentlemen, the subject of the Cambridge Handbook is indeed in tune with the concerns of governments and the international community, and I am confident that its contents will spark meaningful conversation. Thank you for being a part of this essential dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolas Mathieu, Secretary General of the Swiss Commission for UNESCO, under whom patronage is organized this official launch of the book, Cambridge Handbook of IT, Life Sciences and Human Rights. So let's focus on this book right now. Where does it start from, and what and where is it talking about? Marcello Ienca, you are a philosopher, a cognitive scientist, and you are leading the Intelligent System Ethics Group at the CDH. And, well, you are signing several chapters in the book. You are signing the epilogue of the book. So let's start with you, Marcello. Please give us the context and the general background in which this book is, has been initiated.
Sure. First of all, I also would like to start by thanking my fellow colleagues at CDH, in particular our director, Professor Kaplan, and Gabriela Tejada, who also played a key role in organizing this event. And also I would like to extend my gratitude to the Swiss Commission for UNESCO for their patronage. It's an honor to have you. So the background story of this book is probably fairly long, and if I should take the long journey, I think it started in a Swiss train when Roberto and I met after a conference once, and I was at the time doing my PhD in Basel, which was focusing on the ethical implication of artificial intelligence, especially artificial intelligence used to power technologies that interface the human brain, so what we call now neurotechnologies. And Roberto is a legal expert with a human rights focus, and in the train we're discussing that the ethical debate at that time, at least, was primarily concerned with things like implications for criminal justice system, but the underlying fundamental implications from a human rights perspective were rather underexplored, especially when it comes to technologies that establish this direct connection to the brain. And so we decided to work on this topic, and we conducted a comparative technological and legal analysis. Roberto was focusing more on the legal side, and I was focusing more on the scientific and technological side. And then we identified some areas of human rights significance that might be directly challenged through the advancement of these technologies, or areas where the advancement of these technologies could actually promote human rights. Because when we talk about human rights implications, we always tend to have an immediate sort of negativity bias and think that it's all about preventing human rights violations that result from misuses of new technologies, which is certainly a big problem. But another big question is, how can we leverage new technologies to promote human rights, such as the right to science, that we have heard before from Dr. Mathieu. And so we ended up developing a framework for neurotechnologies, which we call neuro rights, which is basically, in short, the subset of human rights that are concerned with the human brain and mind. And this idea kind of got traction, and in the subsequent years led to some policy developments at various intergovernmental and governmental level. So Chile was the first country to introduce the notion of neural rights into their constitution, but we have also seen developments at the level of intergovernmental organizations like UNESCO. We have just heard that they're working on a recommendation on this topic. The Council of Europe that has also been launching a strategic action plan.
Maybe Marcello, just because we will often talk about neural rights, just in a word, say to people who wouldn't know what it is.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we
neural rights, yeah.
Neural rights are that subset of human rights. So they are not something other from human rights, but they are a subset of human rights that are concerned with the fundamental functions of the human brain and mind. So the human person is the subject of human rights, but the human person has some coordinating center from which a lot of things that make us human depend: consciousness, language, memory, and so on. And therefore, we thought that the ultimate protection of human rights has to occur at that fundamental level, because if we cannot exercise a degree of protection and self-determination over our brains and mind, then we cannot exercise that level of protection and self-determination with regard to all the activities that we externalize through our minds, such as our behavior, our ability to interact with other humans, and so on. Okay. And so this was the backstory, and as I said, now we are seeing policy developments in many directions. Milena is chairing an advisory committee to the Human Rights Council that is advising the Human Rights Council about the need for normative intervention in this domain. And Switzerland, I really would like to emphasize this, is really playing a role of a global hub when it comes to the studying the implications of new technologies. And I'm also glad that we have Gerard here that is at GESDA, which is the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, which is a really fundamental hub for tech policy that is focusing on the human rights implications of new technologies. And so this is the long story, but of course, neuro rights are only part of this book, because what we realize is that fundamental human rights implications are certainly raised by technologies that can directly record the activity of the human brain or even alter and influence the activity of the human brain, but they're also occurring at many other levels. And one thing that appeared to us, and I think this is when Roberta and I connected with my colleagues Lisa, Laura, and also I should say Oreste, who's not here because he's currently a Fulbright scholar at NYU in the US. We realized that the line between the biological and the digital world is increasingly blurring. So Professor Kaplan has mentioned before the notion of technological convergence. So the fact that technologies that were originally unrelated from many different areas of human activity, going from the life sciences to information technology, are now converging into bio-cyber systems that merge both biological and digital capabilities. And we are really heading towards a world in which this is increasingly possible. So neurotechnology is a good example of that because it's technologies, digital technologies that directly interface the human brain. But this is also happening at a much smaller scale, for example, with nanotechnologies, that nanorobots, for example, that embed microcomputing capabilities into biological systems. We are seeing that in the field of robotics and biologically inspired robotics. We are seeing that at the level of synthetic biology. And artificial intelligence is also the great equalizer because it's becoming a kind of general purpose technology that is embedded and it's utilized in nearly any domain of human activity. So as these technologies converge, what does that imply for our human rights framework? What are human rights if humans are increasingly blurred and merged with machines? And this is the questions that we wanted to address, and I hope the book provides a general overview of what the key challenges in this area are. And one thing that emerged, and I will close here, is that as technology evolves, rights might evolve as well. And this wouldn't be the first time that it occurred in human history. We have adopted and adjusted our human rights framework to the emergence of new technologies. Notably, for example, the right to privacy emerged with mass media. At the end of the 19th century, Warren Brandeis first conceptualized the right to privacy, given the incredible advancement that the mass media industry and what we would call now the tabloids and the problems that that generated for the private sphere of individuals. More recently, UNESCO, among others, has worked on genetic rights, so how the discovery of DNA and the increasing ability to modulate and manipulate the human DNA leads to novel human rights challenges that are related to the human genome. And so this is going to continue, but as the more humans merge with machines, the more the human rights frameworks also needs to adjust to this evolution. So in short, I would say what if I had to summarize this book in a sentence is it's really about this co-evolution of technology and rights. And it's a co-evolution in which the technological dimension is as important in the social dimension. And we are trying to districate this intricacy at the interplay between technology, society, and the legal system.
Thank you, Marcelo, Jenka. So in this book, of course, we found the philosophical, the ethical point of view, and obviously the legal one you were talking about, it plays a major role in this debate. So does it in this book, it is addressed in particular by you, Laura Liguori and Elisa Stefanini, both partners in the Italian law firm Portolano Cavallo. So you are co-signing the first chapter, which is focusing on mHealth, that is mobile and wireless technologies for the improvement of health. So these technologies are massively used in our best interests, of course, but as always, it doesn't come without risk and challenges for the safety, the security, and the reliability of the data generated by this product. So please, Elisa Stefanini, tell us a bit more about this introduction you're giving in the book.
Good morning to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you again for organizing this roundtable. Yes, our chapter intends to provide an overview of the main legal issues around the use of mobile health technology, and more generally about the use of software standalone intended for health purposes, and then focus on their impact on both the right to health and the right to privacy. From the first perspective, it's clear how these technologies may impact the right of health from several points of view. Mobile health may improve and enhance ways for people to take care about their health. For instance, prevention can be enhanced, improving people's quality of life by spreading the culture of healthy behaviors. We know there are lots of apps for wellness and fitness, for instance, as well as apps dedicated, for instance, to the therapeutic adherence, to help people remember how they have to get drugs at proper times. Diagnosis of certain pathologies can also be facilitated thanks to the use of artificial intelligence, and also through self-assessment and remote diagnosis. For instance, we have a client who has developed an app which is able to identify certain respiratory disease on the basis of the patient's voice. You can imagine the idea came up during the pandemic, and then they are continuing to develop this project. Monitoring also can be substantially improved, especially in the case of chronic disease, resulting in better outcomes for patients and possibly also in a reduction of costs for healthcare services. In the last year, a special category of this software intended for health purposes have been identified and named digital therapeutics. Although there is not a legal definition so far, generally they are defined as technology that offer therapeutic intervention that are guided by software programs of high quality based on scientific evidence obtained through methodologically rigorous trials to prevent, manage, or treat a broad spectrum of physical, mental, and behavioral conditions. The main and more common example, I would say, is software used in the in the field of neurological disease. For instance, Parkinson, Alzheimer. There are kind of digital games helping patients to train their brain. Having regard to this technology, the right to health may be seen under different angles. First of all, from a safety and reliability perspective. Indeed, when people rely on specific technology to take decisions on health, they can be both the patients and healthcare professionals, of course. It must be assured that such technology are safe and effective, first of all. To that purpose, from a regulatory perspective, these software are generally classified as a medical device, and thus subject to the new medical device regulation, MDR, so-called, who requires for most of this software a certification process, like the more known common physical medical device. This certification process involves a third-party assessment of the technology to assure that it meets the expected safety and efficacy requirements. But MDR is not the only piece of legislation that applies to this technology. In this field, we see a strong interplay between the sector legislation, MDR, with other regulation, such as in particular the GDPR and the brand new Artificial Intelligence Act. that should become applicable in the next few years. For example, the MDR sector legislation clarifies that data protection rules needs to be applied when medical devices process personal data, and it occurs always. It means that all data protection issues concerning the collection of data, the identification, the secondary use must be taken into account while the implementation of the proper IT security measure is one of the general safety and performance requirements provided by the MDR. It means that cybersecurity becomes a fundamental component of the safety requirements of a medical device. Moreover, according to the Artificial Intelligence Act, most of the medical devices based on artificial intelligence systems will likely be classified as high-risk systems. And this means that requirements for artificial intelligence systems set out under the Artificial Intelligence Act will be checked as part of the existing conformity assessment under the relevant sector legislation, so under the MDR. So as you can see, the interplay of such regulation is very, very strong in this field. Secondly, another angle to assess the impact of these technologies on the right to health is the accessibility. Indeed, such technologies may not be equally accessible to everybody, not to everybody at the same conditions. For instance, the functioning of certain software may depend on the hardware components, which could lead to inequality, with software performing better are those more expensive. Furthermore, not everyone has access to the internet, and this can be a crucial point, especially in certain areas, as also underlined in other chapters of our handbook. More generally, digital illiteracy that is common, especially among the more fragile people, may be a serious obstacle to the spread of this technology, and from this perspective may have an impact on the right of health. This point is also stressed by Carlo Botruni in his chapter on the telemedicine. Therefore, there are discussions around the modalities to assure that such digital tools are reached by the population. For instance, in relation to telemedicine, that's something a bit different, but same principle may apply. A way under discussion in Italy is the possible involvement of local facilities close to patients. For instance, pharmacies or local clinics, case di comunità, called in Italy, to help people use these digital things when they are not able to do alone. To this regard, another discussion topic is the market access of these technologies that is highly debated, especially in relation to the digital therapeutics. In this regard, we mention and we remember in our chapter a recent piece of legislation approved in Germany in 2019, that is the Digital Healthcare Act, which marked the introduction into the healthcare system of apps on prescription, called DIGA. This means that persons covered by the German statutory health insurance are entitled to use a DIGA prescribed by a physician and are reimbursed for it by state health insurance. The condition is that the relevant DIGA must have been assessed and approved by the German regulatory authority and included in a directory of reimbursable digital health applications. This is a very important precedent that hopefully will be followed by other countries. Belgium has issued recently a similar legislation, because otherwise it could trigger the exclusion of many patients from the increase in benefits introduced by these technologies. As to the impact on the right to privacy, I leave the floor to my partner, Laura Liguori.
Thanks, Elisa. So first of all, I skipped the thank yous because everyone has already thanked, but I must say I'm really excited and also some emotion to be here because we have worked a lot on this book, but I am meeting Roberto in person for the first time, so it's a great emotion to be here today. So yes, I focused mainly on the data protection implications, and in particular in regard to mHealth in our chapter that I wrote with Elisa. But some of these considerations may be like, extended to, to other technologies. So first of all, when we think about health and the data protection issues, first of all, we are talking about health data. So seems obvious, but this is the first issue. And health data are, there is a special regime around the health data under the GDPR and local legislation, because they are considered belonging to a particular category, and they are like also must be protected with a higher standard compared to common data, let's say. So first issue is health data, which means special regime applicable and stricter regime applicable to this data. Secondly, one of the main issues when we talk about ML, software, artificial intelligence, especially in the health and life sciences, there's one big issue, which again seems simple, but it's not simple in reality, which is these are usually complex ecosystems, complex technologies involving a lot of different entities. There might be the healthcare professional, there might be the hospital, there might be, of course, there is a developer of the device, there is a developer of the software, which might be different from the developer of the device. And so the first thing is make a distinction around, on all the entities involved and identify the role and liabilities under a data protection perspective. Who is the controller and who is the processor? Not sure if all of you are familiar with this concept. But and this is not terminological. This is not a formal issue. This is substantial issue because, first of all, different roles mean different liabilities. But secondly, it's also important for the rights of people, because you should know to whom you could ask to cancel your data, to stop processing your data. So there are a bunch of rights around this, and it's very difficult sometimes in these complex ecosystems to identify roles and liabilities. Second, this is connected to another issue, which is these technologies serve a primary purpose usually, which is providing, I don't know, telemedicine or diagnosis or therapy, the one mentioned by Elisa before. But around this, there is a lot of data that this technology can, of course, process and collect. And so there is a lot of issues around the secondary purpose. So what you can do with this data, not only to provide the service, but also to do other things like, analysis, with a huge amount of data, machine learning, and this is another important issue. And I must say that this has been also subject to a recent, very recent, not decision, but guideline, let's say, from the Italian Data Protection Authority, for example, which is not really, I would say, saying a lot of new things, but in some cases, it's highlighting some issues. For example, when it comes to artificial intelligence, of course, the main issue is to have non-discriminatory artificial intelligence systems. And this usually is connected to the quality of data. So what data are used to train the AI system, right? But now, what is becoming more and more clear is that not only the quality of the data is important, but also the logic, so the metrics that you use to train the algorithm, so the logic that is behind the artificial intelligence is also very important. I was recently to a conference, and a lady from a European country, but she came originally from Africa, she was sharing her experience. The legal system of the legal health, the health national system of her country was assuming she needed some type of assistance just because of her surname. So it's not the quality of the data, it's just that you have probably picked up the wrong criteria to assess whether a person has a need of assistance or not. Finally, one other issue. I mentioned before health data. Okay, but even the definition of health data is not so clear. I mean, there might be some health data which are obviously health data. I'm providing a service with a technology. I mean, of course, for example, for diagnosis purposes, of course, the raw data are medical data, but health data could also be inferred data, so data that are not collected by the device, but just you have the possibility to make connections with other data and infer some type of health information around a data subject. And this is another big issue. And finally, I think that one of the, of course, nobody mentioned this yet, but another big issue is security. Security under data protection laws has a double I would say, fold, concept. Because when in our work as lawyers, we help clients to protect their data, and the data is considered as an asset, right? So myself as an entity, I have to protect the data because the data is my asset, personal data is my asset. But at the same time, security is also a huge tool to protect individuals' rights. Because at the same time, security protects individual rights from misuse or unauthorized access to data. So security is another important issue. And in the health sector, for example, basic security measure is encryption. Of course, and pseudonymization is also a huge, a great tool to ensure security. And this is also at the bottom of some recent legal developments. I'm thinking about the European data space, where anonymization and pseudonymization are basically the measures in order to ensure secondary purpose use for health data. And I stop here.
Thank you very much, Laura Liguori. So one other big strength of this book is that it also provides definitions and deep analysis of concepts that we really need to have in mind to think about these questions. And that is quite obvious, I would say, with the chapter you wrote, Professor Roberto Andorno, because as a professor of law at the University of Zurich, you're focusing here on the notion of human dignity, which always comes up in the debates on these questions. And before that, you undermine a widespread idea according to which technology is a neutral tool that is not that simple, you say, which comes to the issue of duality of emerging technology. So we should start with this idea maybe of a duality of emerging technology. Please, Roberto Andorno.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy also to be here. I would say that in a few words, the key idea of the book is to comment on the interaction between emerging technologies and human rights, and to explore the answers, the responses from human rights to those new challenges that emerge here. So I will focus here very quickly on the ambiguity of technologies, emerging technologies, the strong ambivalence of these new technologies. And my claim is that the notion of human dignity usually associated with the notion of human rights, so they are always or almost closely connected. That dignity is called to play a crucial role in the answers to these new challenges, especially, at least in my chapter, especially those relating to life science and medicine. So first of all, what are emerging technologies? This expression is used to refer to fast-growing and radically novel, some also they can be called disruptive technologies that are characterized by their potential to have a great impact on society and also by the uncertainty of their long-term outcomes. So on the one hand, of course, nobody can deny that all these developments in the life science are offering new tools that have a great potential to improve people's health and well-being. Some of these developments hold extraordinary promises in revolutionizing diagnostic and therapeutic procedures. I can mention, for instance, genomic medicine combined with big data analytics, nanomedicine, different forms of brain-computer interface, somatic gene editing procedures, the use of robots in healthcare and surgery, and a great variety of artificial intelligence-based tools. However, these same technologies, especially when they are connected or when they converge, create new risks and could be potentially used for unprecedented forms of human rights violation. They may even jeopardize freedoms that were always taken for granted, and they can do that in ways that were unthinkable only a few decades ago, except maybe in some science fiction literature. I think, for instance, of 1984 or Brave New World. I will mention just two examples of this. One is mental privacy, so the privacy of our inner life, of our thoughts, memories, preferences. This inner privacy was always regarded as a kind of ultimate freedom, as a kind of impregnable, if we can use this metaphor, impregnable fortress that nobody could invade or capture, in particular the state. However, this last refuge of freedom is now at risk due to developments in the area of neurotechnologies by brain scans that are allowing gradually to read our thoughts. And precisely to prevent these, several people, including Marcello and I, have proposed the developments of specific human rights in this area. The other example is about future children's freedom from being genetically engineered, genetically designed by their prospective parents, or we can imagine also by society, by means of germline gene editing procedures. This is a more tricky question because here human rights are less relevant. Human rights classically apply to currently existing individuals, not to future people, not to future generations. So we need to develop new conceptual tools for dealing with this topic. Here's more about the integrity of humankind, the integrity of the human genome, the freedom of future individuals and future generations, etc. Now, having said that, just 2 words about this ambiguity that characterizes emerging technologies. We usually say that every new tool that we develop has a dual nature, as it can be used for good or bad purposes. The same hammer can be used to make a nice furniture or to kill an annoying neighbor. I'm not suggesting anything about that. But of course, the hammer itself is not good or bad. So it all depends on the purpose for which it's used. However, the accelerated pace of science and technology, the globalization of their products, increase exponentially their potential for harm, and therefore also their dual nature, their ambiguity. In addition, the lack of transparency of some technologies, such as artificial intelligence tools and the black box nature of these tools, contributes to the uncertainty about the long-term impact on individuals and society. So what I want to say is that these new technological tools can be potentially used for better, for worse, and this makes extremely difficult to identify the proper policies that would be needed to prevent harm before it is too late. I'm tempted to say that this ambiguity of these disruptive emerging technologies is not just a matter of degree, but a matter of kind, at least if compared with the classic duality of previous inventions. Another factor to consider is that science has, over the last decades, has to some extent become technoscience, as some philosophers of science say. That is, it has been placed almost entirely at the service of technology, of operational utilitarian goals. So technology was traditionally seen as no more than a tool, applied science, as having the task of delivering the products ordered by science. However, these two distinct roles have become somehow blurred or inverted, even inverted, I would say, today. So we have the impression today that science is relegated to the role of a mere accessory of technology and has become, therefore, technoscience, science at the service of technology. But this is problematic because technology in itself can be very useful, but it's blind to values, to questions of meaning. It can go in any direction. Science, I would say reason, which is in the end, science is reason, should govern technology and not the other way around. Having said that, I think the idea of human dignity, even if it may appear as vague or empty, as some people say, I think on the contrary, it's too rich, it's very rich, very powerful and illuminating when we are searching for responses to these new challenges. So what it means? Dignity in the end means just that people, every human being, has an intrinsic value and deserves to be respected as an end in itself, in himself or herself, and never just as a means, as an instrument, as famously was stated by Kant. And human rights derive also from this idea, based on the same idea. International law is very clear that human rights derive from human dignity, concretize in some way human dignity. And the purpose of the state itself is to promote human dignity and human rights. So I would say all social institutions and science also are expected to contribute to this goal of ensuring, promoting human rights and the well-being of individuals. So when making an assessment of new technologies, I think policymakers should ask themselves, does this technology contribute to a better, to a fairer society or not? So, on a case-by-case basis, I would say. It's not something that can be applied to, in general, to all technology. We have to analyze each one in particular and to come to a conclusion. I think in particular of lawmakers who have to take decisions regarding this. And again, the idea of human dignity, of this intrinsic value, worthiness of human beings is very helpful as it provides like an overarching normative concept to answer, or value to answer that question. It tells us that in the end, technology is just a tool. It's there to serve people and not the other way around. It's not, people are not there for to serve technology. So I think this is the key message that dignity conveys in this debate. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Roberto Andono. I'm sure this notion of human dignity finds a a great echo in your neighbor, Dr. Milena Costas Trascasas. You are a lawyer by training, and you are chair of the UN Human Rights Council Advisory Committee. So, well, first of all, maybe what is exactly you're working on, and how does the UN deal with these issues of AI and life sciences consequences we have just talked about?
Okay. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much. And of course, I want to thank organizers for inviting me. And indeed, this is very exciting reflection about all these things. And I thought, and I found very appealing the reading of some chapters of the book. I need to recognize I didn't have the time to read the whole book, but I think it's very exciting. So I would encourage all the audience to dig into the several questions and issues that are raised in this book. I thought, or I found very appealing this idea of hybridization, the hybrid minds, and I think, it is quite shocking. I think when you read these chapters, but at the same time, I think this is our obligation also to think in advance and to be very vanguardist in how we are addressing the issues and the problems. So, as you mentioned, I'm a member of the advisory committee. This year, I'm chairing the advisory committee of the Human Rights Council. So, I think they invited me because I'm the kind of the linkage in between all this conceptual and theoretical thinking behind the development and innovation and the development of all these new and very emerging and very polemic in certain ways technologies, and also the policy, so the policy making and the decision making. And as you know, we have all these international organizations where states are represented and where decisions are taken on the adoption of different international documents, which include several standards, international standards, that then will be followed by, or should be followed by, states and other stakeholders, including, for example, the companies which are developing these technologies. So the advisory committee, it's a body made of 18 independent experts. So it's important to see also that UN have a lot of bodies and other international organizations which are made up of independent experts. So we are not staff of these organizations, and we are providing our services as independent thinkers. And in this case, we have been mandated by the Council, which is an intergovernmental body, the main, I would say, of policy on human rights at the UN level, to develop a study on the implications of neurotechnologies, on human rights implications of neurotechnologies. So I would say it's very challenging study. I started to look at, the subject of neurotechnologies appealed my attention by reading a newspaper where it was written, the title of this article was, we need a new Universal Declaration on Neuro Rights. So I think I would blame Marcello and Roberto for this title of the article. And since then, I started to look into the issue, and I found it was very, very important that we address from a human rights perspective all the risks and challenges, and also the opportunities, as Marcello mentioned. And also, I think the main purpose of this study is also to open the discussion at the UN level. Indeed, the resolution that was passed at the Human Rights Council was sponsored mainly in the diplomat negotiations by 4 states, which were Greece, Chile, Singapore, and Switzerland. So they were facilitating the adoption of a mandate for our body to produce a study on the human rights perspective. But at the same time, we had like the support of 50 states of the international community, but we have to see also that these states are mainly from the European Union area, or also United States, Australia, countries which have a kind of interest in the topic. But at the same time, we see that there are some regions, geographical regions that are not such involved in this discussion. For example, okay, Asia, we have Singapore, but there are many, many other countries that may have an interest and are not involved directly in the discussion. And also, for example, in Africa, we see that these countries are not really directly involved into the discussion. Nevertheless, we know that the impact of the spread commercialization of neurotechnologies will affect, with the globalization, all people in every country. So I think the purpose also of this report is not only to go one by one, looking at the impacts of these neurotechnologies on the rights that we have protected by international law, and also, as Marcello and Roberto mentioned, also to look to what extent we need to clarify the protection framework from the human rights perspective, but at the same time we have to identify which are the groups that could be more a danger, let's say, of the risk of misuses of these technologies. And for example, this weekend I was working on persons with disabilities, and I found it very, very important because we can sell the development, and of course we can endorse the development of these technologies, first of all to, to give more autonomy or to promote the integration and also right to health of these people. But at the same time, from the human rights perspective, there is a lot of discussion about what are the purposes of the convention that protects the rights of the persons with disabilities, which would be also to raise awareness on the value of difference. So there are many, many contradictions as well that may be raised by this study. And I think just to finish, one of the main challenges that I'm finding is that from the human rights perspective, I think we have an obligation to raise what are the challenges and the risks of misuses, and also from a more general perspective of the geostrategic as well problems that may happen, and also how these technologies may impact also on democracy and how our societies evolve, and how also this may reduce the autonomy of the persons. So for me, it's very difficult also to balance these risks that I found as a human rights lawyer, and the opportunities. So to keep the balance. So for that, we are also asking contributions in this. In the development and research and investigation for this report to other stakeholders like companies or those developing these technologies, and of course also medical community, in order to have a more balanced and general overview of the topic.
Thank you, Dr. Milena Costas-Trascasas. Just one more question for you, because you mentioned a link with the companies developing these technologies. How far does this relation go? What is the real power and the real influence of UN on them?
Well, as you know, from an academic perspective, all of us, we know that one of the main issues is not just the declaration and the regulation and the norms, but also the implementation. And what is lacking at the international level and also in national level is adequate bodies with also the specialization and the capacity to understand how these technologies work in order to implement and also enforce the implementation and the respect in the end of the human rights of people, and also to create the means for challenge or denounce those legislations or developments which are against human rights and human dignity. So I think for that, we are all aware of the difficulties. At the UN level, I know there is a big project that is called BTEC project, which is run by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and they are working very closely with these companies. And there are also a human rights and business forum, which takes place annually, where all these issues are also raised directly with those which are representative of the companies. So I think the UN is doing a great effort also to bring all the actors to the discussion, and also to develop this governance framework, but also at the normative level, which can be acceptable for all, but without losing sight that we are doing all these things for people, no? Mm-hmm. So all development has to be human-centered. And also, as Roberto mentioned, I think it's very important to keep in mind that they have to serve for the development of the humanity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm sure these questions will be raised again by you during the debate. Gérard Escher, yes, you still have time to talk, and we will still have time to talk all together. And don't be upset if you see some people leaving. It's just because they have to go back to their teachings. So, Gérard Escher, you are a neurobiologist. You have been advisor to the EPFL presidents, Patrick Abicher and Martin Vetterli, until 21. You are deeply involved in the human rights and policy activities on technology-related issues. As we said, you are an advisor to the board of GESDA, a Swiss foundation for global governance on science and tech. You've been immersed in this question for years. So could you give us, first of all, an overview of the national, international debate on human rights and science? What are, you would say, right now the main questions and the most pressing challenges faced?
Thank you also for the invitation. When I was invited here, Marcello told me you just have to say, read the book. It's a very good book. Please read the book. So back to GESDA, as this is a young foundation, 2 words on what it is and explains why I'm here. So the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator wants to bring science to the multilateral diplomacy table. What does it mean? It's not that we want scientists to explain politicians what to do. That doesn't work. But we want policymakers to understand and to get excited about future science. Future science is the stuff that you do here in EPFL and so on, which will have future technologies and huge impacts on who we are and how we live together. So this anticipation is what we want to teach and to make diplomats excited about. And why do we want to think about this future is so that today we do not miss the opportunities, that we do not take decisions that would be bad for our future, for our kids, for future generations. We want them to be good. In consequence, we try to develop this idea of an honest relationship between science and diplomacy, anticipating the impacts of what is in the labs. So that's GESDA. So I'm here to, so we say that I was immersed for 20 years in human rights and policymaking. I think drowned is probably the better word because, of course, it's a very complex world. I would like to say 2 words first for the human right to science, because we are in a temple of science here. And we are lucky because there is a text. So in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the human right to science exists. And I read it, it's only 1 sentence. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So, good news for us, science is a human right. Science is a human right. So I will ask the question the other way, not what is science doing to human rights, what is human rights doing to science? And the news is good. Because it's a human right, science has to be beneficial. Because it's a human right, science, we have this obligation, we scientists or society has this obligation of benefit. Since it's a human right, we have this, it has to be accessible, it has to be inclusive. There is the word participation, it has to be open. There is the word advancement. Advancement means research. So it's a right to research. It's a right to be familiar with the unknown. It's a capability building that society has to do so that people are happy to research the unknown and know that it's worth it. There is the word sharing. There is the word important. Since it's a human right, scientists have the full freedom of expression, the freedom to do their thinking, to do their action. So it's very important also to say it's good news. So human rights are not some cloudy stuff. Human rights really make good science. The first consequence, and that's the first challenge, is that then scientists are responsible. We have the responsible for correct anticipation. For us, this responsibility of science, which you could call self-regulation, it's among the scientists, but of course, probably more, it's first we have to think about the future. So we have to be able to contemplate what we do, what is coming. The second is control. As we heard already, we have to activate trajectories so that we can manage the desirable outputs. Our responsibility. And third, we have to communicate. We have to be open to the society and tell what we do. So how to build, so our responsibilities is, and if we take the example of neurotechnology, is a scientist, really, when we design the things, when we design the interfaces, when we design the stuff, we already think about the quality, the ownership, the reversibility, it's in the book, the visibility, the obligation to monitor what is happening, and so good news, great responsibility. The international situation regarding human right to science and is complex, as you probably understand. So there are several agencies that are responsible to make sure that this human right or that science evolves within the framework of human rights. We just had a brilliant example with the Human Rights Council, but there's UNESCO, there is ECOSOC, there is the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and all of these agencies have committees and processes and possibilities to work. We heard about the UNESCO recommendation, which is in the works on neurotechnology. We heard about the special report that you are going to do, but there are strange things called like general comments, which bind us, which are made by a committee of experts in ECOSOC. What is missing, I think, in terms of the human right to science, so this normative framework of human rights and science is first, and that's the job of the young people, is what I call strategic litigation. This right has never been taken to court. And you can do it. You do it for climate, do it for the human right to science. So the justiciability, bring it to courts, is still pending. It has existed here and there, but there are very, very tiny examples. We had a discussion at JESTA last year. The access to COVID vaccine is guided by the human right to science, is the right to benefit from this progress. Did we really fulfill the human right to science in terms of access of vaccine? Bring it to court, not JESTA, but you guys can do it. And the legal thinking, I thing has still to be developed on the human right to science. It's in the book here and there, in the good book, science as a common good, you know, the part, not as a critique of technoscience, but as the next step, science as a common good. The problem of trust in science. So what is science? What is that science that is protected? What do we consider as science so that it's worth to be corrected? There's many things that we have to open to epistemic diversity, indigenous knowledge, stuff like that we have to build in our minds on how we could integrate these things so that they work. And of course, Roberto already alluded to it, it's not very open to the next generations, but for human right to science to make sense, it's for our kids, it's not for us. It's really something that we build. We do not want to miss opportunities that we develop today. It's for our kids. So what can we do internationally for this framework of human rights and emerging technologies? For me, as a non-lawyer, you know, as a non-lawyer, so hit me after that, I think to really go to make a new declaration, you know, an additional declaration of human rights, so it's very difficult. Because today, of course, the multilateral system, the global system is in shambles. There's new geopolitics and so forth. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. The example is just this summer, the UN was able to do a high seas treaty to protect the high seas and the exploitation. But of course, so it's a success. It's the Intergovernmental Conference adopted it. But below is a little word that says it will only enter in force when 60 states ratify it. We can bet 10 years, 20 years, we will see, you know, because we need these 60 individual states that sign it before it can enter into force. So it's not impossible, but complicated. So what we think at Gesta often is that we need new ways to do this international diplomacy or science diplomacy, to be more precise, which is more built on coalitions of the willing. People that agree, regions or a couple of countries that really agree. And if I take the example of neurotechnology, I think we need two things to build quickly. One, what I would call is a navigation tool, so that diplomats can know what it is. What is neurotechnology? You know, it's just, because it changes every week. You know, last week, if you know it better than me, but Meta, for instance, the Meta arm of research just put out a new technique, non-invasive, to pretty much very well read your thoughts. So it's still not distinguishing an elephant and a dog, but it's in the reaction. It's, you know, it knows that we thought about an animal. And so it evolves all the time, so we need a navigation tool and make it interesting for diplomats and policy makers to prepare the best way so that we benefit from these techniques and we do not panic when it's too late. And so we also need a safe space where diplomats, policymakers can come together. So Geneva is a good place where they can start to make deals between countries and then to adopt norms and principles. And which is another point. Norms and principles, we have norms as scientists, we have norms, we have principles. It's very important for trust building, And I will end with this last example, if it's not already, can I still say, okay. So we as Gesta, I did nothing but Gesta, is the Open Quantum Institute. You can imagine that quantum computing is the most competitive thing that exists today. It's actually so competitive that no one is even putting down patents. You know, you keep your secrets because you don't want to divulge how you actually move forward in building in 10 years. So we have time to think about how to organize it in 10 years, working quantum computers. But what we did is to build trust. So we create an institute in Geneva where scientists can submit projects for quantum computing if they serve the development goals of the UN. So the Sustainable Development Goals of UN. So that's one of those ideas of norms and principles that are soft in this very hard global world that can move forward, even if it's highly geopolitical, highly divided, and highly regionalized today.
Thank you very much, Gérard Richer. So thank you very much to the six of you. I think that at this point you have a clearer view of the book and of the topic, if you didn't have already. Maybe you have some questions that you want to ask now. Yes? Okay.
Yeah, thank you so very much. This is super interesting, and I apologize in advance. I have to run soon. But a very quick comment. If some use of technology is beneficial or potentially not beneficial, this is something we can't know in advance, because this is an emergent property of a system, which is missing all sorts of parts. So that's just a comment. But if we take the right to science or the right to the privacy of our thoughts, then surely those things must be somehow protected from manipulation. And we don't need some super-duper future technology. We are manipulating that today using populism and advertising and all these things. So shouldn't the extension of human rights restrict or eliminate those bad practices?
Yeah, Marcello.
I can just quickly jump in on this, because you're raising a very important point that we try to discuss extensively throughout the book. It's true that predicting the future impacts of a new technology is an act of foresight, and it's very hard to predict future impacts before they occur, for obvious reasons. But I do not think that this is impossible, and in fact there is a lot of research in the last few years that is attempting to do anticipatory research, and anticipation is the key word at GESTA, but also in ethics we call it proactive ethics. So we don't wait for problems to occur in order to react to them when it's too late, but we try to have a sort of ethical thinking by design in the way we develop technologies and in the way we develop processes around these technologies. And here, time frame is really a key issue. So if you look at technologies like social media, for example, it's pretty clear that the genie is out of the bottle. So these platforms already have, in some cases, billions of users, and they are so widespread that they have already entrenched in our system, and they have proven to have sort of modulating impact on many things, including voting process, electoral processes. And they have eroded the notion of privacy in an unprecedented way. And now any attempt to regulate these platforms is extremely difficult. And even the European Union, that is really attempting to have a sort of hard boots on the ground approach to regulation, is failing to a large extent to regulate these platforms. But if you look at other emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, now there is still a lot of room for a proactive approach. And we see a lot of AI companies and we see a lot of AI researchers that are attempting to incorporate ethical by design approaches in the way algorithms are developed, in the way the algorithms are trained, and most importantly, in the way they are rolled out in the real world. In neurotechnology, we are attempting to do the same. So that's why at the beginning, I really wanted to emphasize that this book is really not about potential human rights violations enabled by new technologies, but also how the knowledge of science and technology can be leveraged to strengthen the human rights framework and also to promote the rights of people. You know, we live in a world where we have godlike technology, as Wilson once said, but it's still unevenly distributed. You know, we've been talking about complex brain-computer interfaces that, combined with machine learning algorithms, can decode brain activity to extremely sophisticated detail, but yet most of the world population doesn't have access to basic medical resonance imaging. And this is a big problem because accessibility and the fair distribution of the benefits of technology is not there. And this is really one of the rights that are very hard to achieve, but I think there is a strong moral need to achieve these rights. And I just wanted to conclude with one point, that this is a well-known problem in people working in technology assessment. It's called the Collingridge dilemma. And it's really this basically disjunctive scenario in which, on the one end, if a technology is in a very early stage of development, we have a lot of room for modifying its development, because the technology is new, we have a lot of power to change it. But we have a very little understanding of the technology, a very little understanding of the future impacts. On the other hand, if we wait long enough, then we have extensive knowledge. We can make very accurate regulation, because we have all the knowledge we need, but it's too late, because the technology is so already well entrenched in society that it's very hard to modify. So the real challenge, and here really I want to call the young students that I see here in this room to think about this. It's really about how can we implement the right time frame in our thinking about science, technology, society, and regulation, and try to have a proactive approach to do science in a way that has ethics in mind from the very beginning, and we try to incorporate these considerations early on in the design phase. And if we do that, we cannot eliminate any risk, but we can mitigate risks, and I think that's the most important thing that we can do.
Thank you. Professor Frédéric Kaplan.
Maybe following up on that privacy question, indeed, I mean, the lesson from the social network is interesting, because we said privacy is important, but over the years, I mean, the interest of actually sharing your life online and the various benefits you could get from doing it was potentially for many people superiors. And so there was a kind of disjunction between the kind of discourses on privacy and right to protect privacy and actual behaviors. And we see that for medical data also. I mean, there are people and movement which are actually making the point that sharing your medical data permits to improve at larger scale, I mean, the medical system, or in fact also saying your own medical data is bringing you maybe better services and better advices in some way. So again, I mean, we view this as being important, but in practice, things can change. And I can potentially extend that to mental privacy, whatever it may mean. But essentially, if there would be ways of accessing inner states of some sort, if that it's very difficult to discuss these just from a normative point of view without putting on the table what you may get concretely in terms of interest, exposure, enhancement of various type. I mean, how interesting, fun, and exciting it could be to do it. So isn't there, when we look at these last 20 years, isn't there a risk that the same thing happen over and over again, that to some extent we move from a normative point of view to a situation where people are just opting in very, very nicely. Of course, we should make sure they should as the possibility of opting out, which is something else, but it's already, we're very far from something which is a typical human right in that aspect, which usually is a bit less controversial in its application.
Can I say something on this? No, because the opting-in issue is a big issue, because what we are realizing that probably is not, today, it's not meaningful, right? It doesn't, from a normative perspective, basing everything on consent and, assuming that people are aware of what they're doing is becoming clear that it's not working. And I want also to connect with what we were saying before. I think I don't think that what happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago can happen again at the same in the same way, because there is discussion around human rights now, which was not the case 20 years ago. When we started working on these technologies, nobody was really focusing on, we must be honest, nobody was really focused on human rights and what the effect could be. So the discussion today is more. I'm not sure, honestly, that a law is the solution. Because what I'm seeing is that law, most of the time, even EU law, it focuses mainly on requirements, on legal, what is legal, what is not legal. And nobody is talking about the purpose, and the design, which I think is basically, So I think there are two ways, right, on which we can work. First is legislation is part of this, but then culture is also really important. So I'm very happy to be here today because I think that culture, because what didn't work in 20 years ago was culture. And now what we can do, apart from all the legal solutions, all the law solutions, can also work on culture from the very beginning, from the children. That's my point, my vision.
Maybe if I can also add a few comment on this, because I think your comment is very interesting because it really shows that in this co-evolution of technology and rights, a lot of rights are codependent on each other. So it's true what you say that people tend to trade privacy for services, and we're seeing this all the time. And I don't think we should have a paternalistic approach of telling people, when and how they should trade privacy for service, because everybody has the capacity to assess which use of their data is sufficiently justified by the processing that will occur. But without digital literacy, it's very hard to make that assessment. So, for example, it's very legitimate if people decide to use ChatGPT and feed that with highly personal data, if it will make our professional life much, much better, more productive, easier, and so on. We use our sensor data from smartphones or Apple Watches to improve our cardiological health. We are sharing sensitive data with a private company, yes, but it makes sense for most people. But then, we had a couple of years ago that app called Face App that was the most downloaded app in 2020, if I recall correctly. And it was like an app that would just make you look like an older person. And there, the purpose is very limited. Most people did it just because it was fun, but they were very unaware of what the app was doing, what kind of algorithms, because that was really an app that was designed to basically train artificial neural network with the most sensitive data you can get, which is passport quality headshots of your face that can be used to train face recognition algorithms. And the data were managed by a very obscure company in Russia. And yet it was the most downloaded app in that year. So that really shows that we really need to foster rights, like positive rights, like the right to science and digital literacy, in order also to protect rights like the right to privacy.
Yeah, and it's about also algorithmic transparency, which you develop in the book also. Thank you. Yeah, I see.
So on the topic of digital literacy and also accessibility of new technologies, how can we explain very complex topics like neurotechnologies, things like that, to people who are not only like the younger generations, like for example me, but also to older people or people, I don't know, that in the 30s, 40s, which are not part of the scientific community? And maybe also how that could impact the protection of misuse of their data.
You're a professor. You're a professor. Okay. Impossible, nul est tenu. Very important question, of course. I drive a car. I have no idea how the engine works. So there's levels of understanding you need. I always thought when you see the excitement of your public that is not scientific, that's the test that you succeeded. That you had done it right. And my first experience was with human stem cells, because that was an issue probably before you were born. 20 years ago, we had a law discussed in Switzerland, and you had to explain what a blastocyst is to politicians. So that was, I think, was fun. It was fun. So you can do it. You just have to realize that you don't need to do the science yourself. You don't need to know everything. You need one thing that works is the use cases. So you push really the science to say, now let's imagine uses. Let's imagine uses of the thing you start to develop. Good one, bad one, whatever. I mean, future uses, listen, because there you have a reaction. And you, as a scientist, have have to be realistic. So you say the technology can do that, but it cannot do that. So if we say today, I'm afraid of a little helmet that can read my precise thoughts, as a scientist, you have to say, this is in the pipeline, but it's in 25 years. It's not tomorrow. This is in 25 years. In 10 years, I'll have a helmet that will tell you if I'm angry or soft, states of brain, but not thoughts. And so if you bring these uses, you know, then they can have a discussion. We go there, we don't go there, and so on. So it's, but I agree. One good example I found is Yann LeCun, the safe Facebook professor on AI that just put out a book. So he tries to show what AI is so that you actually know that there is mathematics behind it. You know, it's not just, but on the same time, so it shows the limits of a mathematical process. At the same time, it shows the promises. I thought it's a good example. But it's a challenge for all of us. And especially, but there's a good example I forgot. Read this book. It's the JESDA radar. And it has a good examples on how we can bring forward stuff that will change our society, ourselves in the future. And it's, I think, sort of explained well.
Thank you. So we have here the mic. You have it.
I take the next one. So thanks so much for this brilliant panel and congratulations on the book. So it's kind of in the same ballpark in terms of questions. So how do you ensure when you are facing with these kind of complex ecosystems, as you call them, Laura, that everybody is basically in sync with regard to the understanding of key notions, such as those of privacy, but as well you mentioned like, human dignity, and when it gets to be implemented in a design process, because it seems to be some sort of challenge. So how do you ensure that everybody can be aligned with regard to the understanding of these key notions?
You mean everybody, you mean the entity in the ecosystems that are working?
Yeah, the end users, the companies, the tech designers and the lawyers and so on.
Nowadays,
so what can you do?
Don't. I mean, you try, of course, there is a lot of, I mean, there are companies which are more mature, companies that are less mature on these topics. Recently I was in a conference, there was a huge multinational company which does, something completely different, but they have a digital ethics manager, for example. And, and she was a lawyer in the human rights before. She was in South America before, and now she is the ethics manager in a company that does, has nothing to do with human rights. So there are companies that are more mature and companies that are less mature. As far as lawyers, I can tell you, this is something on which I don't want to be like, to seem like the old boomer, but when we started, there was no discussion around this topic. And now, not only there is this discussion around this topic, but there are laws which are basically saying to lawyers and to companies that they have to take into account human rights, climate, and environmental issues in their business decisions. So this is something that, to me, is a game changer, right? Because we were basically, as business lawyers, providing advice to clients to make them more profitable or implement projects, highly technological projects. Now, they will have the liability to because there is law coming at the European level, the liability to take into account in their decisions also human rights, social impact of their business decisions. So this is not something that is going to happen like tomorrow, but there is work on this. Then the other issue is law sufficient to ensure that human rights is taken into account? I don't have any answer, but I think that somewhere we must start from somewhere, and this is the point that EU is taken as a starting point. But it's changing, This is something that we need to take into account in our counseling and in advising clients as well.
Everybody has ChatGPT now, so it's okay, you can ask it. No.
That's a good point.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very great panel, as usual, or I know some of you already. Maybe, yeah, first one comment on the question on how do we explain to people who are not from scientific background. I would say that one thing that helps is to listen, and also that when we are trying to find out the impact of technology in society, it's not the role of the scientist to explain. It's basically a co-creation where the different stakeholders come up to the answers to those questions. And that was one comment on that. And I have one question, well, I have many of them. But we mentioned before these incentives for the users that choose a stupid app over privacy. But what about the incentives for the scientists and technologists? And what are the current incentive structures that are in place and how they promote or not the adoption of responsible practices? We have examples of pushback in conferences to like NORIPS on including ethical assessment in their submissions. So, and we know that a proper validation of our development doesn't really lead to a higher impact publication, because that maybe those journals are just putting novelty over a further validation of existing ideas. So how can we also have this cultural change in science, technology, and other elements in the innovation process?
I'll probably try to respond to your second question, because I think what we're seeing here is really an evolution also of the system of incentives that is moving around the tech industry sector. Because if we look at 20 years back in time, there was really no incentive whatsoever to do ethical design. And this is really the ecosystem in which social media platforms were created. And also, if you look at medtech industry, which is highly regulated compared to other sectors, but still, until a few years ago, the push was really towards putting a new medical product, medical device on the market before everyone else, so to be the first one. And then you know, the consequences of the rolling out of that system would only be found out later, but in the meantime you are capitalizing on being the first one. And in this system of incentives, the end user is really just a passive recipient of technology. It's really not embedded in the design process, it's not part of a co-creation process, as you rightly defined it. But I really think that in many areas, this has been changing a lot. In some areas because of regulatory interventions, but also I think because of a general social awareness that people have. And I think now most people tend to be aware of the reputational harm that can be caused to a company by, for example, a data breach. I mean, Meta, Facebook, had to rebrand itself, really find a new name because their reputation was irreversibly harmed by things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And they had to, you know, play the metaverse hocus pocus in order to divert attention from that problem. That really shows that reputational harm to a company can really be now a negative incentive. And the flip side of that is the positive incentive of showing that you are a trustworthy company and you do ethical by design, and then you have a human-centered approach, and you are not trying to obstacle policymakers, but you're trying to work together with them. Also there are risks, for sure. You know, working together with policymakers may also mean that you're trying to nudge them and you're trying to tell them what to do. But still, having the system of incentives that we have today in 2023, I think it's much better than in 2013, which in turn was probably a little better than 2003. And I don't want to be a historical determinist. You know, it's not written on stone that in 2033 will be better than now. But whether it will be better than now or not, it will be within our power. And I think creating these platforms of co-creation, as many governmental and intergovernmental agencies are doing, also incorporating ethical by design thinking in standard science and technology education, I think are all moves in the right direction. Research? Well, if you look at research, disciplines like digital ethics or AI ethics were non-existent until a few decades ago. And we have areas of science like medicine and biomedical research that have been dealing with ethical issues for basically since World War II. So they have a long established a record of ethical education, and bioethics has been embedded in the medical curricula for decades. And engineering is newer, but now it's becoming standard in many universities, including this one. And I think also, you know, at the level of research and education, we are seeing a trend that is going in that direction. And I think this trend is highly socially desirable as long as there is really joint endeavor between basic researchers, technology developers and engineers, ethicists, legal experts, and so on, and the entire scientific community. We should really not forget that the end users are not recipients of technologies, but they are the people that will co-create technology and that should co-create technology. And I think putting a human rights framework at the center of this should really remind us that the human is the fundamental agent that we want to preserve, protect, and promote through technological evolution. And it's not just, you know, the instrument through which we can accelerate technological innovation.
And that we definitely need SHS at EPFL. That's what I hear too. Thank you. One more question. I think it will be the last one. You had one, yeah?
Thank you. But most of my questions are already answered. I'm a member of the Swiss UNESCO Commissions, and when I heard culture, for me it's very important. It was my question about the culture of the academy at the academic level. So it's already answered. But as another solution, for example, maybe to you, how about ranking of institutions? How about standards, real standards? Where are we staying now? And which solution could be the most effective to raise this awareness in this world that is big, is complex, but sometimes we have to take some very simple solution to be effective and to raise awareness also, because everything is going always so quicker and quicker. So you cannot really compare other technology for me, because the time is not the same at the same level. And which type of solution could it be in ranking or other solution at the academic level? Thank you.
I can say a few words. I don't know ranking of universities or research institutions, maybe it could help, but in my opinion, the most effective tool to promote this awareness is education of future scientists. And this is why there is currently like a boom of teaching of scientific integrity, research integrity, especially in Europe and in the US, because we realize that just adopting guidelines or rules is not effective at all, because first of all, many people don't even know that they exist. But so we need education seminars. I can mention Zurich because I know better. In life science PhD programs, the students are obliged to attend modules, seminars on scientific integrity, and in medicine also there are several courses on bioethics. I think that's the proper, more effective way.
Thank you. Gérard Escher, maybe when, oh no, Milena Costas. No, it's okay, you don't push, don't push.
Okay. Just to add something to what Roberto said, I think it's also very important to have legal education. So I think it's very important that people, children, all people are aware of what are their rights, are aware of what is human dignity, what are the limits of human dignity, and also I think it's very important that they ask states at national level to develop also bodies that are capable to protect the rights, and also that they have judicial or other kind of remedies to enforce the rights. So I think it's very important this dimension also of being aware of what are our rights and to be aware of what are the means or ask our national politicians to develop means to protect their rights.
Thank you. Gérard Richer?
If I can add a diabolical thought here. I think it's okay, and it's important for scientists in academic settings like here to have crazy ideas. Just try stuff. If it stays in the lab, it's fine. And then you discuss with people that do the same thing on harms. You can see direct harms. You start the discussion, and then you move to, and you are far from technologies. It's not still, you know, we are just, you know, this last week's science cover is synthetic embryos. What a strange idea to do synthetic embryos. So, okay, but it stays in the lab, you know. So it's important that you guys also feel free to try out stuff, you know, that you have this freedom to research, to explore the unknown. And this is not to contradict education in ethics, so, but don't let the guys be crazy. Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. You know, we would never had the car, maybe it would have been better, but we would be in deep horse shit.
Okay, you have one question? The last one.
Yeah, I allow myself for a final comment, actually also in reaction to this. Before it was also very interesting, this point on the human rights, I mean that everyone has the right to freely participate in cultural life, enjoy the arts and share in scientific advancement. I was wondering, because also for instance, already also for the cultural point which was raised, and also Bruno Latour, let's say, that the science and technology field already talked about the cautious Prometheus, so this role of, fundamental role of designing with care, with attention. I wonder whether we should perhaps also go beyond the idea of enjoying the arts, but actually exactly what the point raised now was also the raising creativity in science, and rather to start including also humanities in the end as actually part of this process, but strongly in, yeah.
Say something on this because it's really something that I'm really you know, I love and I want to share with you. There are, of course, and this is not an answer to your very important point, but it's something. I am also, we actually as law firm, part of an association in Italy which is Women and Technologies, and this is exactly the point, you know, of this association, bringing together humanity, humanistic topics and subjects together with science, because I think the two have been for many, many years, you know, separated. And I think what we are talking today is exactly this point. We cannot consider science without humanistic. And this is something that we are doing as an association with schools, so with children's, you know, and with young women's, and because it's, of course, it's focused on women, but it's focused on promoting also new, you know, professions for young people. So there is a lot of work to be done on this point, but it's completely, I totally agree with you. No separation, it's together.
Yeah, I also wanted to echo this because we have ample evidence that the humanities can play really a catalyzing role in this debate in a twofold way. On the one hand, really providing kind of the humanistic resources and literature, philosophy, the visual arts and so on to frame the debate and also provide that moral imagination that is necessary to address this complex problem in a sort of mentally agile way. But it's also a tool through which, you know, we can leverage technology, and the digital humanities are the perfect example of that, you know, really new digital technologies and humanities research going hand in hand. And I think this also probably, you know, provides us a good answer to the point that Gerard was raising before. I totally agree with you. Like, scientists should have crazy ideas, especially young scientists. But I think precisely for this reason, we need this kind of ethical thinking at the very beginning, because we should really go beyond the old-fashioned idea of ethics, and I think also the law, as something that should police on science and technology, and only restrict science and technology development, putting boundaries here and there. because, you know, the boundaries need to be placed where they're needed. Decelerating or creating obstacles for scientific or technological innovation that can be beneficial to millions of people worldwide is not a morally desirable thing. It's actually morally negative thing to do. So having this kind of thinking should really help us understand that ethics and technology are not, you know, at odds. They are not opponents. They're actually really something that should go hand in hand, because if we have this kind of human-centered, humanistic, and ethical by design thinking, then we leverage better technology. But with better technology, we can also advance and promote human rights and human values worldwide.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. That was a nice conclusion, I would say. Thank you very much to all of you, Marcello Ienca, Elisa Stefanini, Laura Lilguri, Roberto Andorno, and Milena Castas, and also you, Gerard Recher. Thank you very much to the public. And yeah, you have many other questions and some answers also, we can say, in the book, the Cambridge Handbook, Information Technology, Life Sciences and Human Rights. Thank you very much also to you, Mr. Nicolas Mathieu, and to you, Professor Frédéric Kaplan, for being here. Thank you very much.